Press, and you can get there from my websites too. You can also find it on YouTube. You have to look up Lionel Alford, all one word. Or you can go to LionelLDAlford.com and look up Educator and find it. So there's lots of ways to get to it. You can get on the internet, and you can see these. I'm taping it now, and I'll break it up and put it on there. It'll probably take me a couple of days to get it done, so we'll do that. This is the last class, and so we've got to conclude. But in this class, I told you, I promised you I'd show you the other stuff, because we've done all the Apocrypha. Let's do this. This is just this stuff. You know, our time period, 430 BC to 5 BC. We're talking about that. Very unimportant time, right? Very important period. Alexander the Great, the Roman Empire, all that stuff that, you know, we read in the New Testament period, and we wonder how it happened. Well, this is how it happened. And we've got, you know, what is this about? These are Greek documents primarily. They're Septuagint documents. They're, let's see our definition right here. This has been our definition. The books that are included in the Septuagint, which is that Greek translation from about 200, 250 BC, and the Vulgate, but excluded from the Jewish, and since 1826, from the Protestant canons, from some Protestant canons. That's the Apocrypha. And here's that list of books. And we've been through each of these. Like I said before, this is like going through the New Testament or the Old Testament. In how many classes? You know, we've had 6, 7 classes, and wow. It's almost impossible. But I've tried to give you a taste of each one. Now, we've been through each of these books, so you'd say, well, what else is there? Well, let's see what else is there. Well, I'll give you the what else is there. See, do I have it on the next one? There's that big word. Let's see. Anagogoskonema. This means basically things that are good to read or know, because that means to think or know, ginkgo, and we could break that down. I didn't bring my Greek with me, but in any case, that means things that are good to read or know, and pseudographia. Now, why are these important? The other stuff are the things that are quoted or alluded to in the New Testament documents that are not from the Apocrypha or from the Old Testament. That's the other stuff. You knew about that, right? Your pastors tell you all the time. Your Sunday school teachers tell you. There's stuff that is not from the Old Testament. Well, first of all, I've noticed this. Most of the time, they don't even tell you about the apocryphal stuff, right? Right. Well, why not? It's there. We've seen hundreds of allusions to the apocryphal documents. Guess what? There are many allusions and quotes, direct quotes. Allusions are indirect quotes. Direct quotes also from other documents. And they come from these two sources. So what are they? I should have worked on pronouncing this word. Did anybody pronounce this right? Anaginkoskomina. Is that about right? Ginkoskomina, something like that. The Septuagint, that Greek version of the Old Testament, which I keep talking about, which is very important, because remember, all the quotes, all the Old Testament quotes in the New Testament come from the Septuagint. Every single one. And the Septuagint, that's the reason that sometimes you read something in the New Testament that's quoted, and you say, this doesn't read like the Old Testament I have. Because your Old Testament nowadays is translated from where? Masoretic. The Masoretic Hebrew text. And not from, and by the way, okay, here's the difficult one. Well, I'll take a couple of seconds to talk about this. Which is older, the Hebrew Masoretic text or the Septuagint text? Trick question, isn't it? The Septuagint is much older, about 200 BC. The Masoretic text comes from around 600 to 800, 900 AD. Who did what? The Masoretic? The Masoretic text, the Masoretes basically put the pointlets. If you remember, Hebrew text does not have any vowels. And so this was a problem because Hebrew became unpronounceable. There was until around, we're not exactly sure when, but at least until about 600 AD, no one knew how to pronounce any of the Hebrew, even though they had been pronouncing it and saying it in the synagogues for years and years and years. But there were problems because they had lost the pronunciations. This is why they can't pronounce the name of God anymore. So what they did is they went back to Arabic and Aramaic sources, and they used Aramaic and Arabic vowel sounds and incorporated them within the Hebrew text. The Masoretes invented a way of retaining those vowel sounds. And so the Masoretic text is the vowel pointlets added to the Hebraic text. Now the problem is, we're not sure how it's pronounced properly, and they aren't either. And we're not exactly sure if all of it is quite correct. Now, I've taught here before, and you know for a fact, that when we compare the Masoretic text to the Dead Sea Scrolls, or we compare the Hebraic text to the Dead Sea Scrolls, they're right on. There's very few errors, so this is really good. As I've shown before in some of these classes, that shows how well they passed on the documentation. So I don't have any problem with it. I think the Masoretic text is very close, but what's closer? The Septuagint text is closer, but it is a translation. So you see, it's a Greek-ism. It's a concrete Greek text of a very euphemistic Hebrew language. So do you see how neat that is for us? It puts in concrete terms what the rabbis at 200 BC thought about the Hebraic text. It may or may not be correct, but it's what they thought then. A translation today in English would be what the rabbis, a rabbinical translation, would be what the rabbis think the Hebrew text should be translated to, should be in English, which is a pretty euphemistic language, but not quite as euphemistic as Hebrew. They were a group of Jewish scholars, of Jewish rabbis, who identified themselves, and I can't remember what Masorite means. It has a very distinct meaning. Wow.
Did you say it was about 600 AD?
Well, 800 to 900 AD. About 600 AD, they started to revitalize Hebrew and get the vowels back in. Like I said, they use Aramaic and Arabic sources to do that. So Hebrew's gone through some interesting trials, but what's really great is the text we have, since we have the Dead Sea Scrolls now, but before we had the Dead Sea Scrolls, the text in the Septuagint was the best we had. Since we have the Dead Sea Scrolls, that's about the same time as Septuagint. So we have, good proof text. This is really good stuff from a historical standpoint. Things that are read. That's what they say. Things that are to be read. Things that are good to read, also you could say. The list of these works are Tobit, Judith, Wisdom of Solomon, Wisdom of Jesus, Sirach, Baruch, the Epistle of Jeremy. In the Vulgate, this is chapter 6 of Baruch. The additions to Daniel, the prayer of Azarias. I don't know if I remember. Yeah, I think I showed you that one. Susanna, Bel, and the Dragon. The additions to Esther, 1 Maccabees, 2 Maccabees, 3 Maccabees, 1 Esdras, and Psalm 151. So remember, these, if I were to draw you a chart with circles, here's the Apocrypha, here's the Anagisko Mina, the works that are good to know. And we put them together, they would overlap, right? Almost completely. So, especially the Eastern Orthodox Church, this is how they label a lot of their works, although they have, we've labeled a lot of works this way. In any case, and you know this, 4th Maccabees is relegated to an appendix in the modern editions of the Greek Bible. Some editions add the odes, including the prayer of Manasses. We saw the prayer of Manasses. And some Slavonic Bibles add 2nd Esdras, which I talked about before. So, that is the Anagiskomena. Things that are good to read or good to know. The other group is the Pseudographia. The Pseudographia Technically, a pseudographion is a book written in a biblical style ascribed to an author who could not have written it. Who could not have written it. For example, a book that is written, purports to be written by Solomon. We're going to see that. The Psalms of Solomon could not have been written by Solomon. They're too late. The letter of Baruch is too late. So, we find these works attributed in history. And why do they want to do that? Well, they want to attribute them so that the works won't be lost. And they want to attribute it to a person because they may be used, for example, in a church setting or a rabbinical setting or a worship setting, and they want to give them more authority. So we see that a lot in history. It happens a lot. It's pretty common. These works do not appear in printed editions of just about any Bible. But we're going to see that they do appear in some Bibles, some groups. But you notice that all of these, most of them appear in the apocryphal documents. They're included. And we've looked at them pretty extensively. Where these other documents don't necessarily. But I'm going to give you, the reason I'm bringing them up is because they are extensively quoted from in the New Testament. There's many allusions to them. And I'm going to show you. I'm going to have to flip. I've got lots too many slides today, of course. Here's the pseudographia. This was mentioned before, the letter Aristeas, the martyrdom and ascension of Isaiah, Joseph, what's that? Asim, the life of Adam and Eve, the lives of the prophets, the ladder of Jacob, Jannes and Jambres, the history of the Rechabites. These are all, most of these pseudographia, and remember, these are Jewish documents, written in the period we're talking about, or around the period we're talking about, that have been considered important in Jewish rabbinical thought, etc., etc. We'll see some of these. These often included in the pseudographia are 3rd and 4th Maccabees, but they're also included in the books that are good to know too, right? Interesting. And they are, because they are not traditionally found in Western Bibles, although they are in the Septuagint. Now, these documents, the pseudographia, are not found in the Septuagint. Some are. Well, I'll mention some of these documents are, but most all are not. But the other ones are. The books that are good to know. The Book of Enoch, the Book of Jubilees, 4 Baruch are often listed. They are commonly included in the Ethiopian Bibles. We'll talk about that. The Psalms of Solomon, found in some editions of the Septuagint. So here's a whole body of literature. This is a whole body of religious literature known to Christian, known to the early church, known to the rabbis, not known by most of us. Right? Pretty interesting. And they're pretty worthwhile works. Let's talk first about the Book of Jubilees. And I have to run through these because I've got a lot of information on them. I don't want to bore you with too much stuff, but I'm just, like I did before, I'll just kind of give you an outline of the books and some information about them, and then look at some of the allusions, see how many allusions are in the New Testament. This is sometimes called Lesser Genesis, or Leptogenesis. It's an ancient Jewish religious work. It was well known to early Christian writers in both the East and the West. There is no complete Hebrew, Greek, or Latin version. They haven't survived very well. A lot of people, like Brown. Remember Dan Brown, that crazy guy? He wrote that. Yeah, basically the guy is not a historian, has no clue, and everything he said about ancient documents is wrong. No one tries to subvert documents in antiquity. The problem with documents in antiquity is, what happens if they come out of use?
They die out, disappear.
Yeah, they disappear because they're made of paper or parchment. And how long does paper or parchment work? It lasts as long as most of us live, but it doesn't last 1,000 years. We're lucky when we find a piece of paper, in a mummy case, right? And even the mummies don't look too well for wear, in most cases. So, we're talking about parchment, we're talking about,